Yep, you did indeed read that title right. GCZO is in fact a thing, and I'm the girl responsible for it. GCZO is a metagame that had to ban Wartortle, Quilava, and fucking Poliwag. It is currently dominated by Crocodile and Magby, and is for sure the only non-Little Cup tier where Pokemon like Dratini and Mareep are viable. This is also the only GSC tier without legal spikes users, so early on, people use Metronome Togetic to get spikes. Yep, this is gonna be fun. Anyway, hello friends. Today I want to explain how I made GSC by accident and how the tier evolved early on. I'm someone who is very passionate about GSC lower tiers, and making GSC is probably the favourite thing that I've ever done with these tiers. To understand how I made GSC, we have to time travel back to October 2020. I'd been playing GSC NU for about 6 months at this point, and I had finally started to appreciate GSC underuse around this time. The more important matter though, is that GSC PU had just been massively returned after the Raichu ban in NU kind of shake things up. GSC PU got a decent amount of attention, getting a spotlight ladder, 2 threads dedicated to it, and a spotlight tournament. By November, GSC PU had been developed quite a bit, so people had an earth-shattering question. Was it actually time for GSC? The answer was, nah, not yet bro. GSC PU is only a month old still. There was a viability rankings for GSC PU though, so maybe in the future we could try the classic everything below B- move down. So yeah, GSC didn't happen in November. Instead, it happened like 4 weeks later in December. This brings us to the earth-shattering day that was December 15th, 2020. And I remember what happened on this day very well. On this day, I was in the GSC Discord discussing GSC NU like I usually did back then, and I was just shitting on Graveler, who I thought was like abysmal back then, I don't know why. I mentioned that Graveler gets OHKO by like any grass attack, and then another user called Napalm Kid sent a calc of an Oddish Absorb doing around 40% to Graveler, and then another user, Trebong, mentioned Oddish being used in GSC ZU, and then I mentioned Bulbasaur being the premier grass type in GSC ZU. It just spiraled out of control from there. For the next like half hour, it was just us three discussing random strategies we thought of for GSC ZU, such as what psychic types would be allowed, and then I did it. I made a channel called GSC ZU Discussion. For this tier, I went with the classic below B- strategy that the GSC UUVR did for GSC NU. Now I want to preface that I did this as a joke, since I had like no desire to make GSC ZU a thing yet. The very first message in the channel was me, in all caps, going, "Don't take this seriously." But despite that, people didn't take it as a joke. The channel quickly became super active, with multiple people joining and discussing the tier. Only like 4 days after I made the channel, there would be hundreds of messages in the chat every day, people discussing meta strategies, teams, and asking for games. It was honestly kind of insane. Me shitting on GSC NU Graveler resulted in an entirely new GSC tier being made that a lot of people played. Only like a week after making the channel, I decided, you know what, maybe it is time for GSC ZU. The tier was genuinely the most active channel on the server, and people already knew what the top Pokemon were. Togetic was the best Pokemon in the first era of GSC ZU. As one of the few fully evolved Pokemon left, Togetic was very tanky and could pose a sweeping throw with a Cursed Rest Talk set. It could also use Sunny Beam sets to good effect. Togetic was amazing and simply the best, most splashable and centralizing Pokemon. Other standout Pokemon included Smoochum, who was strong and had an amazing stab combination, Weeping Bell, who was a dangerous sword stance sweeper that could use Sleep Powder, Doduo and Diglett, who are both fast and offensively potent, Onix, who could wild Curse Rest Talk Togetic and explode, and Grimer plus Weezing, 2 poison types with Explosion. The real standout early on though was Poliwag. Poliwag has access to Bellytrum plus Lovely Kiss, which is an incredibly dangerous combination. It was one of the fastest Pokemon in the tier, sitting in a base 90 speed tier that only Diglett and Yanma were faster than. It could easily get endgames easily, with its few answers gone. So yeah, it was pretty controversial early on. People didn't think it was broken yet though, as there were 2 other broken mons running around. The first phase of GSC ZU had every middle starter evolution legal, bar Charmeleon, and all of them were good. The 2 standouts, though, were Wartortle and Quilava. Wartortle was an incredibly potent tank, being offensively solid and difficult to KO. It was pretty much the only reliable answer to Quilava. Wartortle was quickly thought to be overpowered. There was too few Pokemon that could actually switch into it and KO it reliably. A lot of games came down to Rest Talk Wartortles just stalling each other out, which is far from healthy. Only about a month after GSC ZU was established, people wanted Wartortle and Quilava gone. Quilava was almost impossible to stop with Sunny Day sets, being fast and quite strong for the metagame. Wartortle was pretty much the only reliable answer to Quilava, but then everyone wanted to ban Wartortle, so people thought that Quilava would be broken as fuck without Wartortle. In early February 2021, the ZU All Gens community put up a vote on Quilava and Wartortle, resulted with both mons being unanimously banned a few days later. The tier improved a ton with this change, and this was around the time that the first GC ZU Cup happened. This tournament was great for developing the fresh new metagame, and a lot of people played it and enjoyed it. There truly was a player base for GC ZU at this point, and it just made me so happy. After the tournament ended, players reflected on how the tier was without Wartortle and Quilava, which led virtually everyone to the same conclusion on who was the new number one, and that Pokemon was Croconaw. Croconaw was so good in the Wartortle metagame, though somewhat overshadowed by the Turtle. Without Turtle around though, Croconaw established itself as the best mon around. It checked an insane amount of the tier, was offensively potent, and could run several different sets. It was essentially GSC ZU's equivalent to Snorlax and OU. Other staples like Smoochum, Bayleaf, Togetic, Weepinbell, and Duo were still great, and a few new Pokemon were explored in the GSC ZU Cup, like Nidorino, Dratini, and Ledybug. By far the two most important additions though were Magby and Tentacool. Magby was now the premier fire type with Quilava gone, since it was just very fast and powerful. It also had a great move pool with options like Thunder Punch and Thief. Magby became one of the best Pokemon in the metagame, and near automatic inclusion on teams. Tentacool, meanwhile, was one of the few Pokemon who could safely set up on Croconaw, running a Swords Dance plus Substitute set that acted as a danger sweeper. So after this tournament, GCZU stayed the same for a few months. It was a fun tier with a small player base. I mean, it's fucking GCZU. Isn't that like the stupidest thing you've heard all day? It is an absolute meme of a tier, but that is what people like about it, including myself. And so would you believe me that people eventually started to complain about Poliwag? Poliwag has been controversial since day one of GSC0, and people are just sick of it at this point. This mon can just end games instantly with its belly drum set, and it forces you to run mons like Diglett on offensive teams. Poliwag was super unhealthy for the metagame. The tier would be largely the same without it, just a lot less stupid without the broken baby tadpole. In November 2021, a vote went up on Poliwag, and it was finally banned. The GSC0 player base rejoiced, as they no longer had to deal with this broken ass baby tadpole. And that brings us to today. It has been just under a year since Poliwag was banned, and GSC0 is still around. It's still dominated by Croconaw, Magby and Togetic, and has a unique charm that you won't find elsewhere. And to think all this bullshit happened because 15-year-old Dawn was saying GSC NU Graveler was bad. God, the GSC lower tiers are so fucking cool, aren't they? Like, they're so cool, I fucking love them. My god, this is my longest video, yeah, holy shit, help me.